Okay, welcome back. Today, we are going to talk about why your pitch deck and nailing it is non-negotiable. I was speaking with a woman yesterday, this amazing woman starting this incredibly cool company. And she said to me, why is the pitch deck? What is the deal with the pitch deck? Why is this so important? And I was like, yeah, it's pretty damn important. It's pretty critical. And I'd go as far as saying it is non-negotiable. You have to have a good pitch deck, a great pitch deck. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because chances are you've got the idea, you've got the passion, you've got probably the prototype, you've even probably got some traction, and you need to go out and raise the money. But if you don't have a good pitch deck, it is going to be even harder than it already is. So we're going to go into why it's so important today and some of the things you need to make sure that you do. Okay, let's go. As I said, we're going to talk about why your pitch deck is so important, and I happen to put together a pitch deck for this. So if you're listening on the podcast, you can check it out on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, if you happen to want this deck, let me know. I can email me hello@seedmoneypodcast.com and I can send it over to you. But we're going to talk about this, why it's so important. And it's such a common pitfall for entrepreneurs to think they know best and to kind of make this long deck that tries to squeeze in everything about their company. And really, that's like the worst thing they could try to do. So I'm hoping this will hit home today on why this is so important. And again, chances are you haven't been through this process before. This isn't stuff you learn in school. But I swear, if you are just beginning at the process of raising money, look at this like a skill set you're going to learn, because this is going to help you in anything you do. It's going to help you in pitching to customers. You're probably going to want to raise money down the road in the future. It's going to make it that much easier. So embrace it like you're learning a new skill set. Try to forget everything you were taught about, I don't know what, business plans, entrepreneurship, wherever it is that those thoughts come from, that you need to squeeze everything about you and your company and your product into your pitch deck to investors. Try to move that out of your brain and embrace the best practices for this process, because it really, really is important and it can make or break your fundraising journey. So, okay, let's get into it. If I can figure out how to go forward on my deck here. Okay, so first of all, the purpose of the deck, why it's so important, is because you need to capture attention quickly. So investors are looking at hundreds of opportunities, often hundreds a week. So especially if you are submitting your deck to any kind of angel group or VC or anything like that, I mean, you are a needle in a haystack. I hate to say it, but that is the truth. And you need to be able to capture attention quickly. So it's super important. Think of this as like your billboard for your business. So imagine a billboard on the side of the highway. If a company, I don't know what, let's just say Nike, decided to fill up the billboard with a ton of different info, right? Tons and tons of messaging and photos and, backstory and all their different product lines and everything they do on one billboard. And you're driving by on the highway. Guess what? You are not going to remember one single thing you saw on that billboard. Your brain is just going to go and ignore it. It is the same thing with a pitch deck. So they are looking at hundreds of these. And if you have a whole bunch of stuff, or it's vague or hard to understand in the first 3, 4, 5 slides, they're just going to fly right past it. So think of it like a billboard for your company. It needs to be clear, it needs to be memorable, and it needs to be concise, because you need to be able to capture attention quickly. One of the most important things. part of that is standing out. So you've got hundreds of decks you're being compared to. You can count on a good chunk of those not following these best practices. I guarantee it. So the good news is if you follow the best practices, if you put it in the format that investors want to see, that alone is going to help you stand out. It doesn't even matter what your company is. If you have a super buttoned up pitch deck, that alone is going to help you stand out. So, and the reason why you need to stand out is because you need to get that initial meeting, right? Because that initial meeting, even if that investor is not interested, well, one, if they are interested, the whole goal of the first meeting is to get the second meeting. And if you walk them through a pitch deck in that first meeting that turns them off or is too long or too confusing, you're not going to get the second meeting. So your whole goal is always just to get to the next step. Your goal is not to have them see the pitch deck in the first, round and then invest the next day. Same as a billboard, right? So their goal is for you to just go, oh, Nike or whoever, right? Whatever. I don't know who puts up billboards. I don't know, whatever. The lawyer who's going to get you money for the accident you were in, right? There's tons of those on the way to Mammoth. So anyway, that they're not trying to give you all their info. They're just trying to have you take the one next step of putting that phone number, dialing that phone number, or looking up their website. That's it. They're not trying to get you to purchase there on the spot. So think of it the same way. And then if you do meet with that investor and they're not interested, you want to come across in a really good way so they'll at least give you a warm intro. So capture attention quickly and move someone to the next step. That is your first goal. Okay, the second reason this is important and really critical part of this is telling a cohesive story. So we all know that companies are messy, startups are messy, there's ups, there's downs, there's twists, there's turns. And when you try to explain all that stuff, it can get really confusing. I just did this morning. I interviewed on a podcast. Someone asked me about something, I don't know what it was. And even with that, it's so hard to tell your story concisely in a cohesive way that flows where someone can actually follow it, right? And I find myself do that. I catch myself when I start going off on a tangent, or I really do try to tell a cohesive story so that someone can get the nuts and bolts and follow it quickly. But it's not easy to do. And I've been doing this for years and years and years, and it's still tough to do, right? I have to make a very conscious effort to do that. So you need to do the same thing in your pitch deck. It's important to tell a cohesive story. So part of telling a cohesive story, I'll just go into a few of the parts here. One, most important thing is communicating the problem. So the problem is something that you are hoping your investor will identify with, right? You just want them right off the bat to agree with you and go, oh yeah, that's a problem in the world. Totally get that. That makes sense. That's a win. If they can just understand on the first slide what the problem you're addressing and relate to that, that is a win right out of the gate on the very first slide. Don't make it vague. You're wasting slides if your slides are vague and trying to lead up to this grand aha at the end or at some point in the middle of your deck. You're risking losing them. So be upfront, be concise, and be clear with what the problem is. Timing. This is another part of the story that I think people miss sometimes. Why is the timing important? This doesn't apply to everything, but a lot of businesses, there's a timing factor in the market or in the world or in your industry that is important. And I think that can be a really critical piece to communicate clearly if that is an element that's relevant in your business. Investors want to know why now? Why should I invest in this right now? So I think timing is key, and that's something you definitely want to communicate. Obviously, team experience and uniqueness. So if you want to put your team up there, and why this team. So more important than even listing all the things, you can be really concise with, even one sentence at the top that describes your team, has done this before or has X number of years in this industry. Why are you guys unique to do this? And try to do that quickly so they can get it in a sentence. It doesn't help to just list a bio of everybody on there. That's asking the investor to read through and interpret. So again, imagine a billboard of your team up on the highway. How are you going to communicate to a car flying by what your team is all about? You're not going to put 3 people, 4 people, 5 people's bios on the billboard, right? Because nobody in a car is going to read that. So you want to make sure it's clear, quick, concise, and tell that story concisely. Logical organization to your deck. Okay, this is also very important in telling a cohesive story. So organize your deck like problem, solution, market, traction, business model, team, opportunity. You don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Everybody might tell you, a slightly different order, but have a logical organization that you're pulling them through. So you want to be really careful you're not jumping from one thing to the other or reiterating things that you did previously in the deck. I see that a lot. Entrepreneurs do that. They feel the need to reiterate maybe one aspect of their business or the problem or the market multiple times, but you're really just kind of wasting slides that way. You don't need to reiterate stuff. Again, think of it like a billboard. You just need to tell a cohesive story quickly. And in order to be cohesive, it's got to have a logical progression, and you don't need to repeat a bunch of things throughout. The last one I would say with a cohesive story is start with the problem and then transition seamlessly to the solution. So again, you don't want to have a bunch of stuff in between. You don't want to make them guess what the solution is or where's that coming in. So problem, solution, I think should be right next to each other. And it's really important that be early in your deck. So don't make them wait to get to the end or middle to explain what the solution is. You're waiting too long. You need them to know how you're addressing this problem in the market right away, up front and quickly, and let them easily connect the dots. So I think, again, this might be a good way to look at it. Let's say you had 5 billboards on the side of the road, each a mile apart, right? And the cars flying down the highway. And what would be the sequence of those 5 that would leave them at the end with a clear message? I think if you can frame it that way, I think it'll make this process a little bit easier. So you want to make sure you're allowing them to connect the dots as they go through your deck seamlessly and quickly. Okay, another reason that your pitch deck is so important, and this has nothing to do with the investor. This is forcing clarity in your thinking. So when you go through the pitch deck yourself, it's going to force you to find the gaps, find the things that you haven't thought through, find the areas where you do need clarity. And this is normal and it's okay. And if you don't have everything perfect, totally fine. So crystallizing key elements. What I mean by that is you want to have certain things that investors are going to expect to see, and you want to communicate those concisely. Value proposition, market opportunity, go-to-market strategy, and your financial vision or financial snapshot. So it's going to force you to crystallize those things that we don't typically formalize when we're in the busy, messy startup process. So yeah, we have our go-to-market strategy, and it's in a bunch of spreadsheets, and our team knows what we're doing, but we don't crystallize that into a concise couple sentences. So it's going to force you to do that, which is good. These are good things, right? Clarity. It's going to force clarity. So if you can't explain your business clearly and concisely in 10 to 15 slides, then you actually need to refine the understanding of what you're doing and what your business is. So this process, this is going to ensure that you have a clear, concise grasp on what you do and what the opportunity is for you in the market. So there's a lot of value to you being forced to seek clarity in your own business. So I think that's another really important thing. So the role of the pitch deck is for investors to clearly see what the opportunity is and be able to decide if this is a good fit for them. So again, you can't do that if it's confusing. And you have to be able to speak clearly and use your pitch deck to do that. And it's going to help you, again, find those gaps. Again, the startup process is not structured. As we all know, we're flying by the seat of our pants. We're building the airplane as we're flying it. And this is why I believe in business plans. I know a lot of people say, don't waste your time on a business plan. I believe in business plans. It doesn't mean it needs to be 100 pages, but it forces you to think through these aspects of your business because you guys, one of the biggest mistakes I've made multiple times, I should say, and I've caught myself, in recent years after you make the same mistake twice, but staying focused when opportunity presents itself, if it's not part of your business plan, you probably should really think long and hard whether you should pursue that, because when you spread yourself too thin, it takes your eye off the ball. It takes or if you have shiny object syndrome and you're going for the next thing that pops up in front of you, that can be a business killer, speaking from experience. So the act of this structured pitch deck helps you to refine what your, plan is, how to stay focused, and any gaps that you have in your thinking or in your business to allow you to kind of be focused. Okay, this is super basic, but the other reason your pitch deck is important, it just serves as a visual reference, right? So again, the billboard example, it's very visual. It catches your attention when you're going down the highway. You could call an investor, leave a voicemail, not going to work. How are you going to get all that across, right? But a pitch deck is just a visual reference, and it should be visually pleasing to the eyes. So you need to have consistent fonts. You need to have consistent colors. It needs to look like it was created in this decade. There are so many AI tools now. There is no excuse for not having a polished pitch deck. Now, the problem is a lot of the AI tools, what they won't do is they will not help you, at least at this point, any that I have found. I've used a lot of them. They will put together this pretty deck, but there's a bunch, it's like AI, where AI is at. It's only as good as the info that you put into it, right? So if you take a really dialed story and narrative, just the text of a deck, and you drop it into, I like beautiful.ai, if you use that one, it's going to give you a good pitch deck. But if you just take your long, drawn-out deck of a ton of information and drop it into an AI deck, maker, whatever, it's going to give you back a bunch of jumbled stuff. It's not going to be cohesive. It's going to be confusing. So it's really important that this is visually appealing to investors. It looks updated. It looks like you're, have recently done this and it's not dated. I see a lot of pitch decks, you guys, that look dated. There is no excuse for that. Don't do it yourself. Unless you're a graphic designer. Now, I have one friend who's a designer. He made a beautiful pitch deck. Gorgeous, right? So unless you are a designer yourself, you should not be choosing the fonts, the colors, the branding. Don't do that. That's not your expertise, okay? Let somebody else do that for you or use an AI tool. It has to be cohesive. So the other reason you've got a pitch deck and why it's important, when you do finally have a conversation with an investor, it's going to give you something to focus on. Now, a lot of times investors are going to have already read your pitch deck, but they're still going to want to see you most of the time, walk them through it. I think for them, it's just a little bit of a test. How well can you pitch this? How well can you present your company, right? There's like a level of, they're interviewing you in this process. Now, sometimes they might say, I've already read your deck. I just want to ask you some questions. That's fine too, but you can go back and reference slides in the deck. So it gives you a point of focus during your conversation. And while you're speaking, it's reinforcing your message all the way through. So if you're just talking to an investor, that's fine. But sometimes visuals of your product or, a very simple graph or a traction timeline can help just give a visual reference that's going to reinforce what you're talking about. Okay, I think this one is actually one of the most important ones. It is setting the tone for professionalism. You guys, they are interviewing you as much as they are looking at the opportunity. And you better believe if someone's getting 100 pitch decks on their across their desk or their computer or whatever, their phone, right? They're looking at these on their phone. If it does not scream, I'm professional, chances are you're going to get a pass. I can't think of a reason why somebody would be excited to start a meeting with a deck that looks completely unprofessional, okay? It's a thing. It just is a thing. I know that you think your business and your company and your opportunity is the best thing out there right now, and you should think that. But unless your deck, the professionalism of it, matches your opportunity, you're going to get dinged. I hate to say it. Unless you're like a multiple exit entrepreneur already and you've got such a strong track record that investors are just lining up, dying to throw money at you, then if that's the case, you're not listening to this podcast, right? So if you are listening to this podcast, chances are you have not raised money before and you are really setting the tone for how professional you are with this deck. And it's not going to make you look good if it's disjointed, if it's not cohesive, if it's too long, if the colors are off, the fonts are off, you have way too much text on your slides. You're going to get dinged on professionalism. And it's such a bummer because you might have amazing work ethic. You might be super professional. So just make sure your deck represents who you truly are and how professional you are. It's really, really important. So I think, as I have here, credibility through design, unless you are a designer yourself, have somebody else do it. It's going to give you a lot of credibility if your deck is polished. And professionalism in communication. Your deck is the starting point. You need it to look professional. And then you need to also learn how to pitch it professionally. And pitching professionally is kind of the same thing. It's concise, having a cohesive story, not being confusing, not being vague, not going off on tangents. So it is super important. That is why the pitch deck is so important. So I would say the last reason why a pitch deck is so important is because it's a living document. It's going to evolve with your startup. Now, I want to make the most critical point here. If you take away nothing else, tweaking a pitch deck does not mean adding slides. So when I say this is going to evolve, so you're going to start it, you're going to get it as good as you can, follow all the best practices, and then you got to start getting it out there. If you get the same feedback from, say, 7 to 10 investors, then it might be time to address something in your deck and make some adjustments. And again, think of this like marketing. You wouldn't go and change your whole product because of what one customer says. So if you go out and you pitch your deck, and you get feedback from one investor, don't go and, rework your whole deck. You're going to want to just you're going to want to hold, first of all, if it's from one investor. Pitch it 10 more times. If you get that exact same feedback from multiple investors after you've pitched to 10, then look at making adjustments to your deck, but do not add slides. You can add appendix slides at any point. Backup slides are great. So if you're getting questions, add some backup slides. So during your pitch, during your Q&A, remember your pitch is only 10 minutes. You've got 20 minutes at least of Q&A after that, hopefully. And pull your backup slides for the Q&A, but don't add slides to your actual pitch deck. So the last thing I think is so important here, again, going back to investors are interviewing you, right? Here's what's going through their head to some degree. If I invest in this company, how are they going to report back to me? What kind of board meetings and monthly updates am I going to get? Because if your pitch deck is 100 slides with, a novel written in there, guess what? They do not want that in their monthly company reports from you. So you're going to have to hold board meetings. You're going to have to send them monthly updates or quarterly updates or whatever it is that you agree to do once they invest. And they are not going to want a novel. They're going to want clear snapshots to understand where your company is at quickly and concisely. They are busy people. So again, I've mentioned this before, but Mark Cuban, COO, at one point, she told me, you need to speak and report to Mark like in caveman speak. Like it needs to be so short and concise. The guy is so busy. If you have a question, you do not give a narrative in an email. Okay. You just give super concise, super quick. And I've gotten so good at this over the years where if I am, reporting out or something, I guess I don't do it as much now because it's not like I'm not in as critical of a space to have to do that. But in my professional career, I've gotten really good at, if you have a question for somebody, state the question up at the top of the email and then give the background. Don't start with a ton of background and then ask the question, because guess what? No one's going to read the, narrative or the novel at the top of your email. And the pitch deck is the same thing. So they're interviewing you. How is this person going to be to actually work with? What kind of data and information am I going to get from them on a quarterly basis? So this pitch deck is presenting that to them. Like, hey, I'm buttoned up. I'm professional. I can communicate and report to you concisely and clearly and get you the information that you need to make decisions or to help me make decisions. So think of your pitch deck as that also. Super, super important. So that is why your pitch deck is so important. Bottom line, having a great pitch deck is 100% going to increase your odds of getting funding. A great pitch deck dramatically improves your chances. It is not easy to raise funding ever. There's no easy button. Again, unless you've already had multiple exits or whatever. If you're a first-time entrepreneur raising money, it is typically a challenge. It's one you can totally do. That's the good news. If I was able to do it, I know you can do it because I did it against all odds, literally. I had every single thing working against me and I was able to do it. But it is because I was super coachable. I had advisors and I did what they told me to do. And I was able to get the funding. And you know how I did that? I had a very concise, I had a 5-slide deck and I had a 12-slide deck. And they were simple and high level. If anybody ever wants my decks, now I will say they look dated at this point because they were, 15 years ago. But I had them designed at that point. And they were clear and concise because I took the advice and followed best practices for what it takes to get funding. And it evolved and it changed and I tweaked it, but I never added a bunch of slides. I would add appendix slides. So again, there are best practices and that pitch deck really, really is. I don't care what anybody says. It is important. And it's an important exercise for you to go through as the founder or founders. And it's an important tool to attract investors, to get that initial meeting, to get a follow-up meeting. And worst case, if they're not interested, you want to show professionalism and to the point where they want to introduce you to someone else. So I hope that's helpful. If you have a pitch deck you want me to review, you can email it to me at hello@seedmoneypodcast.com, or you can book a call with me on LinkedIn. I do Fridays, typically free pitch deck reviews. I just did one yesterday with a woman and it's so fun. I love helping people with these because it's just exciting to see what people are doing. There's so much passion and great energy in the startup process. And anything I can do to help, because I know it is not easy sometimes, I'm happy to help. So we'll see you next time.